you see it? How did what work for you? How did so, all good. In fact, I may not even use outside the. I do want to use a couple pictures. What I'd like for you all to do. Well, see what. How do we do we go about how to test how to affect. You put that so much on the skin.
No, I think that I think those things.
Yeah, this is how it is until exam day. All right, we are yoink. We are live. So, like I said, I will. All right, you guys, we're going to go ahead and get started. I have my assistants here today, our teachers. We got some really good feedback on their help. I'm going to lecture for a few minutes about key things, and then what I'll do is I'll toss it over to the girls for input. Well, this is how I saw it. This is how I looked at it. Because not all of us see things the exact same way. And for some students, that's very helpful. Like you may not see it how I'm explaining it, but you may see it how one of them explain it. And then we got some really good feedback on us kind of floating around in your small groups and trying to make sure that we have understanding of the content that we're teaching. So we'll try to do these, we talked about maybe, especially on Fridays, right? Kind of Fridays can kind of be our check for understanding. A couple of things before we move on to the main lecture. I didn't send the class email as a BYOSG, bring your own sunglasses. Guys, I'm super pasty. That's just how our family has a history of skin cancer. So like I cover up like all the time, but we're also doing lower extremities. So I'm gonna be using landmarks and using stuff. Okay. So yeah, kind of bright, but that's okay. So today, what I want to do is I want to remind everybody before we get into the ankle and subtalar joint, we have to communicate side, right? Right, left, my right, your left, but it's the person you're analyzing side. In addition, we want to identify the joint that we're talking about: right ankle, right subtalar, left subtalar, right knee, left knee. It's just examples. And then we communicate the motion or the position. So like the motion and position is actually kind of the last thing. And this will help you to focus. It'll help you to narrow it down to only the possibilities that joint can do, right? So it's actually supposed to be a kind of a process that you can get into the habit of forming and learning and developing to make less mistakes, honestly. Side, joint, and motion. Okay, I want you to also remember about those illusions. Specifically, it looks like it's moving, but it may not be, or it looks like it's not moving, and it is. Easiest example of what I just said is the one we've done 1,000 times. It looks like it's moving because you were taught leg go back is this. It's not, and it looks like it doesn't moving because the leg didn't go back, but it actually was. Just be aware of those illusions. And then reminder about references. So global references are the things that we can relate to the room, ups and downs, lefts and rights, towards, back, but joint motions are relative or local in reference to the joint itself. So you may say, foot goes back and you have this, but you could also have the exact same motion by this, or you can have both of them move. It's not like this rule that we follow for the room. It's relative to the joint. And I give an example. Does somebody want to help me on the table? Someone that doesn't mind getting thrown. I want to give you an example of Tony Jackson. An example of when you guys are going to be working with range of motion, I want to give you an example of how, if we're looking at internal and external hip rotation, if we don't understand local and global references, and I'm going to check Miriam's internal rotation, and I start doing this, as soon as her pelvis starts to rotate, her leg keeps moving. But that's not internal rotation of her hip. She's starting to compensate by rotating her pelvis. So if you're not aware of these concepts, you may be giving her range of motion that she doesn't have. That happens all the time. My father can't even rotate his hip. So when I check his, he rotates his pelvis like this, and he's like, oh, shit, look, I'm moving up this thing. That's nice. No. So these are the things we're trying to work on to apply so that you can be better clinicians in all the different fields that you're going to do. Okay. All right, let's start with the ankle. But I want to, oh look, you're famous. I want to do this. Page 28 and page whatever, 25. Why is it just like it's not there? All right, guys. Before we get into the ankle and subtalar joint, and this is where chime in, guys, when I ask. So important to realize that we have been using the term ankle for two separate articulations our whole lives. When you sprained an ankle, that probably was not your ankle. That was your subtalar and transverse dorsal joints. When someone has a high ankle sprain, there's nothing high about it. That's an actual ankle sprain. Okay? I'm going to give you some examples. I'm going to try to show you the illustration. Okay? Think of the ankle and the subtalar joint as a skateboard. The wheels on the skateboard are like your ankle. And we'll talk about the motions, but it literally is. It's like your ankle produces, or the wheels of a car, if you can't visualize a skateboard, where when you're driving, the front of the tire is like your heel strike when you're walking. And then while it's rolling friction, the middle part, the part that's kind of flat and pushed into the ground, that's like when your foot flat. And then when you toe off, that's like the back end of the tire. That's actually what propels the car forward. Okay? So our wheels are our ankle joints. And our ankle joints, unlike a wheel that could just keep spinning, we have to spin, reach the end of our range of motion, lift it up off the ground, reposition it so that we can spin again. So it's like an ipsilateral spin. I'm going to spin this one's going to prep, spin this one's going to prep. Okay? But we also know that a car or a skateboard has to balance. It has to wobble. There's wheels and there's wobble. And for us, that's the magic of the subtalar and transverse dorsal joints. Okay? When you're doing a balance test and you're getting like sway back and forth, that's not happening inside the wheel. You think about it. You probably, if you did this, you don't want that to happen. That's a really bad day. You want the wheel. You're going to put a lot of insurance to make sure that wheel stays structurally together so that you do this. And the biggest reason, it makes logical sense that if I dislocate my shoulder, that's a bad day, but I can still run away from a burning building. I can still get away from a predator. But if I dislocate my ankle, I better have help that can take care of it. So we put a lot of effort structurally, ligaminously, bony articulations to make sure that the wheel only does this. That's why it takes so long to recover from a high ankle sprain, a true ankle sprain. Because what you've done is you've taken the talus, that's the tarsal bone that articulates with the distal tibia and fibula, and you've rotated it in that socket where it literally pries those two long bones apart. That's a bad day. That's why the popular tightrope surgery is very popular, because they literally drill in there and take two ropes to kind of make sure those two bones stay connected. So before we get into motions and practicing the motions, to me it's so important to remember that this is not ankle. This is the wobble. This is ankle. We go for our people watching on the stream. This is ankle. This is subtalar. Think about it. Submarine under the water, subtalar under the talus. Subtalar and transverse tarsal joints, those are going to be gliding and shifting. And that's exactly what you need when you're trying to balance and wobble and shift and dissipate forces. When you're in your car, don't you kind of need shocks to dissipate force so that you don't feel every hole that's in every road around here? That's what we have here. We have shocks. And yeah, that includes our arches, but all those little tarsal bones have space between them. And if you're walking on uneven surfaces, your heel can kind of shift this way, and your cuneiforms can shift this way, and it allows us to dissipate force so that we can move smoothly. It's a smooth ride on our car, but it's not just the wheels. It's the shocks. Okay? So that is the first major important thing. Guys, input on not forgetting that subtalar joint motion is not ankle. That's a big mistake. Any insight on that?
I just remembered that subtalar is side to side.
Ah, good. Good. And for the side to side, that's when it looks like it's moving and it's not, right? But you can still, and we're going to learn this as we develop, you can still go side to side, like literally go side to side. And you can shift and glide. But I like the side to side because that takes into effect the foot moving about the shin or the shin moving about the foot. It's a really good reference. Do you guys see what I'm saying? That we've been saying we've been spraining our ankles our whole life. So on the test, it's so hard to not say, oh, the ankle does this, and then all of a sudden talk about motion that's not happening at the actual ankle. Okay? So the ankle joint itself is a uniaxial hinge joint. You should know what that is. Uniaxial hinge. It's formed by the articulation of that talus, which is a tarsal bone, and the distal tibia and fibula. Those two bones distally create like a cave. It's a socket, kind of, but it's a cave. We call that a concave surface. So like if you were going to play with Legos, the little protruding part would be like a convex surface, and it would fit into the hole. That's a concave surface. That's how things connect and fit. So the distal tibia and the distal fibula form this little socket. I'm not going to hold this on the test, but we call that an ankle mortise. And we have ligaments and other structures that kind of maintain these two bones together. But the talus is literally the wheel that fits inside that socket. Okay? You guys might have heard these ankle bones, like the medial malleolus and the lateral malleolus. Those are just areas of the tibia and the fibula. Just like Acadiana is an area of Louisiana. Acadiana isn't a separate state. It's just an area of a state. So the bones are the tibia on the inside and the fibula on the outside. But they form these concave surfaces distally that we call the medial malleolus and the lateral malleolus. Not separate bones, just areas of bones that have purpose. Okay? Uniaxial hinge. What should that all of a sudden snap into our brains? Motion about one plane from that joint's perspective, about one axis, uniaxial. How many motions? 2. Why was, I'm going to ask you guys a question that I know you know the answer to. They know a lot of answers. Why wasn't the ankle joint, if it's a uniaxial hinge, why wasn't it on our first test? Why were we not accountable for it for our first test? What do you guys think?
Because you have two forms of flexion, not flexion and then extension.
That's exactly correct. Because we wanted consistency on that first test, right? We wanted everything to be about flexion and extension, in the fetal, out of fetal. It didn't matter the kind of joint. You had uniaxials that went in the fetal and out of fetal. You had biaxials that went in the fetal, out of fetal. You had triaxials that went in the fetal, out of fetal. This one is two different forms of flexion. There is no extension at the ankle. And the best part to me is that we're going to explain why. Like, it makes sense why we don't have extension of the ankle. Okay? For the subtalar joint, that's the gliding and shifting, the side to side. I love that analogy, the side to side. If we know that the inside bilateral axis, inside, outside, we call that medial lateral. Think of it like this. You have a right and you have a left. Those are sides, right ear, left ear. But how do I communicate a side of a side? This is the right of my right, the left of my left. Well, the left of my left is the same structures as the right of my right. That's confusing. So that's why we have this mirrored concept of lateral and medial. The lateral side and the medial side is a side of a side. You don't have the lateral side of your neck. This is the right side of my neck because I only got one of it. So it can't be the right and the left. But when you have two appendages, you have to have a word for a side of a side. So we have the medial side, the inside, and you have the lateral side, the outside. The gliding, the side to side of the subtalar, the wobble part, we're going to call that inversion and eversion. And the wheel part, we're going to call that plantar and dorsiflexion. And of course, we're going to lecture on which is which and why we call it what it is. I'm giving you the game plan. I'm giving you the verbiage, and all of this is in your units as well, okay? So now I'm going to turn it over to the ladies, and you guys talk about how you learned the difference between plantar and dorsi in your own unique ways. Because let me tell you, after doing this for a long time, there is a lot of great and different ways to learn these things. And each one of you might hold on to a different analogy. Like, oh, that works for me. Or, oh, I like that one better. Okay? How did you guys learn the difference between the two?
So for me, I saw dorsiflexion, where like your toe is close to your shin. I saw it as like a dolphin's dorsal fin, or will stick up. And then plantar flexion, I learned where like you're planting your foot into the ground.
So keywords. So like the dorsum of the foot is the top. The dorsal fin is on the top. So you learn that like if the top part of the foot is closer to the front part of the shin, then I have dorsiflexed, right? Dorsiflexion. And then the plantar surface of your foot is on the bottom. You've heard of a plantar wart on the bottom of your foot, right? So that's the bottom part. So the bottom part, and again, this is what's crazy. Top part gets closer to the shin, well then that means the top part got further away from the back, right? So it's all how your brain works. The plantar got further from the front, but it got closer to the back. It's two different forms of the same thing. Okay. Anybody else have a different way of kind of learning the verbiage for plantar and dorsi?
That's how I learned
Dorsi.
Without the fin part.
I like the next picture of the differences in
Let's do it.
deflection.
So you like the motion? So like, wait, I'm sorry, this one or the one before?
This one where you
Gotcha,
can see
gotcha.
why they're both called
Gotcha.
flexions.
So what do we know about flexion? Flexion does what? The fetal. So I'm going to set that up for how you learn the difference between the two. Two different ways to get in the fetal.
Like on the test, if I was confused between the two, I would get into the two differences in fetal position.
So I would go like that. And if I was going down, if I was standing up going down, I knew that I was in a dorsiflex position at the end there. And then, I'm not gonna.
I did it. You gotta do it.
Around, and you're trying to get into a ball. Like that's what fetal is. So then you're not dorsiflex. Your leg,
You're
your ankle is going as flat as it can, or like plantar as it can. So that's what that looks like. Going.
So what Sarah's demonstrating is there's two different ways to get in the field. There are two different practical ways for our ankles to get in the field. The first one is when you're standing or when your feet are on the ground. If you were going to get in the field or get into a ball, it would make sense you wouldn't be like Michael Jackson, right? You wouldn't get into a ball doing this. You would get in the fetal with your feet on the ground with a dorsal version of flexion of the ankles. But when you're off the ground, when you're laid down, anybody wake up kind of more into a ball? Not to get into your sleep habits, but I guarantee you probably don't wake up being dorsiflexed. You probably wake up being plantar version of being in fetal. Think about when gymnasts are flipping in the air. They're not dorsi version of fetal, they're plantar version of fetal. Feet off the ground fetal versus feet on the ground fetal. Does that make sense? It should be logical. That there's no extension because there's two different ways to get in the fetal, whether you're weight bearing or not weight bearing. Cool. So where is anatomical position? All right, roughly about a 90-degree angle. We don't live in Jacksonville. We're in Lafayette. From here, I can have dorsiflexion from anatomical, or I can have plantar flexion from anatomical. So therefore, I could be dorsiflexed in reference to anatomical, or I could be plantar flexed in reference to anatomical. So therefore, I could have dorsiflexion to that version of fetal, or I could have plantar flexion to that version of fetal. Now, keep in mind, we're going to go around and kind of do a little lab, make sure everybody's on the same page. That does not mean that I can't have plantar flexion when I'm weight bearing. You know? I mean, if I get up on my toes, I have plantar fetal. And when I come down, the illusions come in when, like, I have dorsiflexion from plantar flexion to, and then I can continue that plantar flexion by getting up on my toes. That was plantar flexion from. Dorsiflexion to, dorsiflexion from, plantar flexion to, plantar flexion from. So that's kind of weird, where the whole range of motion doesn't necessarily look consistent like other joints. Does that make sense?
So what if you were to bend your knees forward, but at the same time, kind of like feel your tiptoes?
Show me.
Michael Jackson.
We're good. I just want to make sure that I'm seeing what you're seeing.
So like, if you're doing this, and you do this. Yeah.
No, you're good. So watch, let's go A, go down. Bilateral ankle joint dorsi. Then go up on your toes. Bilateral ankle joint plantar.
Okay.
So what you would do based off of the angle that I saw, you would have dorsiflexion from, and then when you get down your toes, you had plantar flexion to.
Okay.
Yeah. Good question. Because that may be a yes question.
So we have extension,
For the ankle, there's no extended, there's no extension.
So you're just saying what position is, like what's your position? That's your motion.
Your position would either be, you have three positions. You're either in anatomical, I'm going to get the middle finger out of the way first so that I don't get with it. You have anatomical, you have plantar flex, or you have dorsiflex. Makes sense? Cool? All right, guys, we're gonna take 10 minutes and we're gonna kind of float around. We're trying this new lab stuff. I think it's best if you feel it, if you do it. And remember, like, just because one ankle plantar flexes doesn't mean the other can't dorsine flex, right? So that's why we say right ankle plantar, left ankle dorsine, or right ankle dorsine, left ankle plantar, bilateral plantar, bilateral dorsine. On the test, we'll use practical things like pressing the gas or taking your foot off the gas and stuff like that, okay? So we'll float around, make sure that we're all on the same page. I would love for people to get up and visually see the dorsi. One thing we like to do is kind of freeze it, like in Despicable Me with Gru, when he has the freeze rate, and then you freeze it. If I go down, I should, like say I want to analyze my left ankle, freeze it. My ankle has nothing to do with my knee, so I can bring my knee back and say, oh, look, I'm dorsiflex. I saw a few heads go, okay. Because you see, visually, we're so used to moving the distal part. But in human motion, we can keep the distal part fixed and move the proximal part, and we have the exact same movements because it's relative of the same bone. Okay, we're good? All right, guys, on to, ready, break. Let's spread out and analyze, apply, and develop the concepts of two different forms of flexion. Guys, also feel free, this is a great way to practice. Get on your mobile devices, get on Google, search things, you know. To me, that's a great way to learn how to study. You know?
If I lean more this way, that's your side. If I lean more this way. Even though it's still.
I'm gonna go get skeleton and do a quick review for those of you who are following. The ankle joint is here. How the talus fits into the mortise of the tibia and fibula. It's the wheel. It is not the wobble. That looks like it would hurt, right? The wobble is going to be underneath the talus. It's called the subtalar, submarine under the water, subtalus under the talus. So basically, that calcaneus, how it glides and shifts under, and all these dorsal bones glide and shift to give us our side-to-side motion. That's coming up. Okay, so it's important to know that the ankle is just this, that you're healing. And you have two different forms of flexion. You have dorsal flexion, dorsiflexion, and flexion. Two different ways to get in the feet. Fetal with your feet on the ground is going to be dorsal, and fetal with your feet off the ground. So that's why we don't have typical flexion and extension, because there's two different ways to get for the ankle. So what I ask students to do for a few minutes is Google some pictures, ankle position, and practice just looking at different ankle positions and say, okay, I'm dorsiflex, I'm plantar flex, or I'm dorsiflex, I'm plantar flex. You can do it in real time, or you can pause the
So, question.
Yeah.
So this is where like I'm in fetal, and then my toes come in, would this still be?
No, you got plantar.
Because I'm.
Because you have plantar. Because you went, think of it like this, go back down. Your dorsiflex, right? Go back on your toes. Be more closer to you.
What about?
So it's relevant. So one way to look at it is if we did a before and after. When you go down, okay, I see dorsiflex. But when you go up on your toes, I'm repositioning my head, and I'm like, oh, you're not dorsiflex anymore.
Yeah, that angle is gonna be.
You had that plantar flexion to get there. All right, guys, I have an example. We're still going to float around, but let's do a real-time example of questions that you know could be on the test now that you've had one. Position of the ankle. What would happen if he started pushing the plate away from him? What motion would we call that? Or if he started with his leg straight and he lowered it down, what motion would that be called? So let's kind of use some practical examples to kind of practice our verbiage of this, okay?
So we can say.
Okay, so let everybody have a second.
So what is it? It's kind of like if I was like
Guys, if this is his foot and this was his shin and anatomical, wouldn't it have like kind of a right angleness to it? Is that what you see on the picture? So he's got to be, he left home. He's got to not be home. Y'all want another one? Okay. All right, guys, so this picture is user permission. I actually took this photo myself a couple months ago. The lighting, sometimes the lighting does have an effect on photo. I'm gonna let each of my assistants decide, because I think practice is cool, where you want to start, where you want to finish. Right, so I'm gonna let you guys kind of play around with the questions in your own little subgroups. From where you want, A to B, B to A, position. It's all part of my master plan, because I'm a co-author on that book. I'm just kidding. The only kind of books I could write are like coloring, that kind of stuff. Do not get distracted with the feet are in, or the feet that has nothing to do with the wheels. When you're turning the corner, the wheels are still rolling. Okay, so don't get caught up. We're going to talk about that kind of stuff later. It's all about the wheel. Okay?
All right, let's do left.
You could also come up with your own questions. Come up with your own questions.
Okay, so what we'll do is we'll do some simulated questions. Let's say I go from right to left. Start, what ankle motion, file out, your side flash. Right, start, finish, file out, and plan to I'm plantar flex. I'm an anatomical method.
Y'all see that? Yes. What was that?
All right, guys, here is a follow-up question. Let's say we start on the position on the left, which is pretty mostly anatomical-ish. Remember, I'm not going to ask you like 1 degree, 2 degree stuff. From there, he lowers his heels down. Okay, I'm giving you a practical visualization because I don't want to just say the answer. But from there, he lowers the heels down. So his toes are still on the board, on the wood, but he lowers his heels down. What would be that motion? Don't say it out loud so that everybody has a chance to think. And then if he keeps his heels down, what would be that new position? 2 different questions, motion and position. Starting here, he lowers the heels down while keeping his toes on the board. All right, guys, what would be my new position? Dorsiflex. That would be dorsiflex. And I know that because it's relative to anatomical, right? I would be dorsiflex relative to anatomical position. The motion to get me there would be dorsiflexion, absolutely. If I'm going to be west of Lafayette, and I'm in Lafayette, I got to travel west to get to west, okay? And that would be dorsiflexion from anatomical. Then if you come back up, you'd have plantar flexion to anatomical. And then if you continue the range of motion, plantar flexion from anatomical. Dorsiflexion back to, if you sank it down, dorsiflexion from. Cool? All right. What about, what position, well, I guess the answer is on the screen. Let's see if we have any, let's do, there's a good one. All right, guys, what would be the position of her ankles? Plantar flex. Yep. Pretty good. I could demonstrate this for you, but I wore my Crocs today. If not, totally do it. So she's going to have plantar flexion, right? When she's kind of jumping, she's going to stay plantar flex, but when she hits the ground, she's now more an anatomical, right? So how does she go from a plantar flex position to more of an anatomical position? She'd have to have dorsiflexion, which kind of makes sense, right? Because when you jump up, when you land, that dorsiflexion is going to kind of help to slow you down. It's going to kind of help to dissipate that force along with some knees and some hips as well, okay? What other, can y'all think of any other common examples that we've done in the past?
The ski position.
Ooh. Here, find that one for me. I think I put sky position.
Yeah.
Look, I can't spell. Fine. If you press on the gas pedal, you can probably have plantar flexion. When you take your foot off of it, you can have dorsiflexion. Just remember the rights and the lefts, although a lot of our examples were them doing the same thing, they don't have to. You know, imagine you splashing in the water, right? Or pedaling on a cycle. You know, just because one is doing one thing doesn't mean the other one has to do the same thing. So we don't assume. That's a really good one. Yes, that is correct. The right expression after seeing someone in that position is Jesus. That's what it would take for you to get in that position. Guys, a lot of, this isn't going to be on your test, but a lot of, you ever notice like when we're young children, man, they can get into that crouch position and those heels aren't coming off the ground. It's really incredible. And then as we get older, yeah, it's kind of hard to get all the way down and start to come up on our toes. You know, a lot of that is just really, really tight muscles that are pulling in those directions. But when you can have the flexibility, you can get into these crazy positions that I will never in my life get into. I don't even register on a sit and reach. You know what my score on a sit and reach is? Ha ha. My score is LOL.
That's so funny.
You know what that's called? Being a hypocrite. All right, guys, I'm going to teach y'all about movement. That I don't. All right, what about when he lands, or she? When she lands or he lands, doesn't it make sense that probably you're going to have some, right? Like in other words, if you're door side, when you land, eventually you're going to have some plantar, eventually go down. I think that's really unique about our ankles is that, again, these are our wheels. We can't keep spinning like a tire, so we have to give ourselves the range of motion we do have to propel ourselves, and then we got to reposition it to be able to do it again. Right? So while this wheel is rotating, this wheel is repositioning itself. And then while this wheel is rotating, this is position. It's called an inverse. This isn't going to be on your test. It's the end of the class. I thought y'all would think it's cool. It's called an inverse pendulum when we walk. So you think about a pendulum swinging side to side. For us, the swing side to side is fixed on the ground. You don't want your foot to slide off, right? So we're going to fix it on the ground, and we're actually going to reverse swing the pendulum over the top of it. So instead of a movable pendulum like this when we're on the ground. So in other words, we have a pendulum with our swing leg, but when our foot is on the ground, we're going to reverse that pendulum and actually move the clock by the arm. And then we're going to move the arm, and then we're going to move the clock. Then we're going to move the arm, then we're going to move the clock. We rotate to translate. And that's how we can move the whole clock because of the swinging of the arms.
I have a question about the stuff too.
Thank goodness you didn't have a question about clocks. I was providing my clocks there.
Okay, does the stuff tailor move in the train?
What a great question. What a great question. So because the subtalar, now we're going to develop the subtalars on Monday. Right, so today was a lot about the ankle because we wanted to really establish the ankle is not the side to side, right? Because it's a gliding and shifting joint, a majority of its motion, is going to be side to side, which is frontal plane. But because all of these shifts occur like across the foot, when you first start and versus when you end, you see how the foot starts to kind of reposition itself, like almost like more and more and more sagittal as we keep gliding further and further away from the foot. So it's not one true plane, which is actually what we want because we're going to have to reposition ourselves in kind of a multi-planar perspective. So ankle joint, uniaxial, sagittal all day long. But the subtalar and transverse tarsals, there's so many parts to that gliding motion that we're not going to, because it's not occurring about one fixed point like the knee or hip. That's why it's kind of in that gliding category. But transverse plane would be like if my foot swung like this, like a golf club, right? Like it would be like a golf club. And that although that can happen at the hip, we actually do not want that to happen at the ankle, because if we had transverse spin of the ankle, that would be a bad day. In fact, that's the mechanism of injury for high ankle sprain. Somebody's foot is here, someone lands on it, and it puts transverse torque, and that talus rotates in a plane that it's not supposed to, and it'll pull apart those bones. Yeah. Great question. All right, we're good? Okay, guys, well done.
This is a good picture for physicians.
Oh, what a good one. So take a picture of this one on your way out, and we'll talk about it on Monday. Did that work?
I think so. Wow, this is good. Anatomical,
I love
dorsiflex, plantar flex. That's really good.
I like that a lot.
All
Yes.
three.